Hello everyone, this is MystieGaming and welcome to my channel. Today we are going over how to revive prehistoric creatures with the mod Jurassic Reborn in its newer versions 1.18.2 and above. For this video I am only going to show the T-Rex so that you can discover the amazing creatures and models that this mod adds on your own. So let's get straight into the video. So, first things first, throughout your world, you are going to find fossils everywhere. Now, you might notice that when you mine them, they mine super slow and they're going to break absolutely nothing when they're dropped. That is because fossils are fragile and you need to apply something called plaster and bandage before you mine them. Now that you've mined your fossils, the next machine you are going to need is the cleaning station. Now, I always recommend that you install just enough items or a similar mod that adds this side screen for recipes to show you exactly how you need to craft everything. It is an absolute lifesaver in modded. But now that you have your encased fossils, you're going to go to the cleaning station and you're going to put them in here with some water, and it's going to wash all of the stone and plaster and bandage off of your fossils so that you get, well, just plain fossils. Now that you have your fossils, the next machine you are going to need is the fossil grinder. So we're going to grab some extra fossils here for the demonstration, and you are just going to throw them in here. And just like that, you're going to get a lot of junk, but you have a rare chance to get soft tissue. And once you have soft tissue, we can move on to the next step. So, now we need to evaluate the DNA quality of our soft tissue. So we're going to put it in a machine called the DNA sequencer with some storage disks. And just like that, we got 3 discs with Tyrannosaurus DNA, and we really lucked out this time, and we have enough to get a DNA quality of 100%, because we can't make a dinosaur with a DNA quality of 50% or even 99%. It has to be the full 100, which leads me to our next machine. Now, there is an alternative to this first half of the process. You don't just have to get DNA via the fossils that you find around your world. You can also get it from the items dropped from ice shard ore and amber ore. And honestly, this way is a little bit faster in getting creatures, in my opinion. So, the amber ore is going to drop mosquito amber or amphid amber, and the ice shard ore is going to drop frozen leeches or sea lampreys. Now, using the DNA extractor and some storage disks, we can get a random disk of a certain type from each different drop. So the mosquito and amber will give you a random dinosaur from about a selection of 70 of them, and it's going to give you a random DNA quality and a random dinosaur, and those DNA qualities are usually pretty high. And the sea frozen leeches are going to give you, it looks like kind of Ice Age era creatures, and then the sea lampreys are going to give you some of the sea creatures that are added by the mod. And it'll just be a random chance in the DNA extractor, and I always like to automate this a little bit with just some hoppers, and it's super easy. But let's get back to the rest of the process. Now, the next machine that we will be using is the DNA Combinator-Hybridizer, which pretty much allows you to combine 2 DNA disks with lower than 100% quality. But if you click this little button over here, it allows you to make the hybrids that are from the Jurassic movies that this mod adds. Now, I'm not going to get into the hybrids in this video, just enough items actually shows you the recipes for them if you want to get into that. So we're going to switch right back over to the Combinators page, and we are going to combine our two T-Rex DNAs, which for some reason went over here. And just like that, we have a storage disk with 100% DNA quality. Now, thankfully, we only have to go through this first process once, because this DNA quality of 100% storage disk is not going to be used up in these later processes. So we can make as many T-Rexes as we want with this one disk. So let's pop over to the next section of our video. And our next machine is the DNA synthesizer, which requires your 100% DNA disk, some DNA nucleotides, and some test tubes. So we are pretty much going to put the test tubes in here and the DNA nucleotides. Now, one thing to be careful with this machine is it will put as many DNA things into the test tubes as you put test tubes. Like, it doesn't stop. So I always just leave a couple test tubes in there for however many dinosaurs that I want. In this case, we are just going to do one. And just like that, we have some Tyrannosaurus DNA in a test tube. Now we are going to take our test tube of DNA over to the Embryonic Machine and grab some syringes and a petri dish. And we are pretty much going to put this DNA into a syringe for the next step. And there we go. Now that you have your syringe, the next step depends on what type of creature you have. For this instance, we have a T-Rex, which is kind of a reptile and hatches out of an egg. So we're going to go over to the embryo calcification machine. However, if your dinosaur is a mammal or a water creature, you're going to come over to the cultivator, and you're going to need some water and some type of food. So you're going to want to fill this with water, insert food to fill up the nutrients section, and down here you're going to put the DNA syringe. But since I have a T-Rex, it's not going to work. But down here is a temperature gauge, and this determines the gender of your creature. Yellow will be female and the red will be male, and if you want it to be random, you're going to put it in the center on this orange bit. But now let's move on to the embryo calcification machine. And in this machine, we are pretty much just inserting our syringe of DNA into an egg of any kind. And there we go, we have a Tyrannosaurus egg. But you might notice you can't place it down, which will lead us to our next machine. So now we must hatch our egg in an incubator, and we are going to need something called peat moss in order to do that. So you craft peat moss using this recipe. Actually, you craft peat, and then you use the peat and surround it with moss carpet to get the peat moss. Now, if you have played this mod on 1.12.2, this is an entirely different process. So just keep that in mind if you are kind of relearning the mod in newer versions. But let's pop over to the incubator, put the peat moss in, and we are going to do a random gender of the Tyrannosaurus egg. And this down here is the progress bar, and this is going to take quite a while, but it has this really, really cool animation and block. And just like that, our T-Rex has hatched, and it is a female. So we are going to pop right over here and right click on the ground. And oh my goodness, she's so small. Small enough to go straight through the bars. Well, anyway, that really doesn't matter all that much, but I do want to take this as a chance to discuss Taming. So, as you might have noticed, our little dinosaur is not following me around and not acting like a tamed creature. That is because dinosaurs will only be tamed upon hatching. There's no other way to tame them once they have hatched, and many of the creatures cannot be tamed, including the T-Rex. So there's no way to tame this one, and if it catches you in survival mode, it is going to kill you. Now that you have your little dinosaur into the world, tamed or untamed, there are 2 books that are going to be incredibly helpful for caring for them. The InGen Field Guide and the Paleopad. Now, the InGen Field Guide really is more helpful before you hatch your dinosaur if you're curious to where it was from, some of the scientific stuff, its skeleton, and more specifically, if you don't know what diet it's from, this also gives you an idea of how big the creature will be, even though there is no scale, so it is a little bit difficult to tell. But the one that's going to be the most helpful to you while your dinosaur is around is the Paleopad. And if we find one of the little T-Rexes that have hatched, oh my goodness, it's so cute. You will see why. It has the health, the hunger, how thirsty your creature is, how old it is, its diet, whether it's diurnal, like when it sleeps, all of this information, some more scientific information about how big it's gonna be, what it was. Now, the Paleopad is so helpful not just for this, but for tracking things like your feeders. You can name the feeder using the Paleopad and then track how much food is in the feeder, so it's a really easy way to see at a glance how much food you need. Now, getting over to Enclosure Building. Jurassic Reborn adds a couple of options to build your enclosures with, keeping in mind that dinosaurs will break blocks. So the first option you have is the security fence, which is kind of a multi-block structure created with fence poles, fence wires, and fence bases. So we can just, create a little fence like this. It's super simple. It's just very iron intensive. Now these fences will also need to be powered in order to work, and you can tell if it's powered based on the color of the top of the pole here. So this one is not powered, and this one is. Now there are 3 different levels of security: low security, high security, and low, medium, and high security. As of right now in the mod, it really doesn't matter which level you have, just as long as all of the wire fence bases and fence poles are the same level in the multi-block structure. So you can't mix the medium security and low security fence wires with the high security bases, for example. And as you can hear, it will deliver an electric shock if you are not careful, and that's how it keeps the dinosaurs in. Now you power them with a redstone signal, so you can use levers at the bases here, you can use redstone blocks, you can even just put a torch under there and cover it up. Now, your second option for enclosure building, since these fences aren't always practical or even cheap to make, is the reinforced stone. So there's loads of different variants of this, and it's made in its base form with just 1 iron surrounded by stone, and it's super, super easy and very versatile, as you can see. Now, there are also reinforced doors that will function as iron doors, and for your glass needs, there is clear glass, which by default is connected. Well, with all of that being said, that's all I have for you today. So if you found this tutorial helpful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye!